In just 7 years' time, it's hoped there'll be enough wind farms to power every single home in the UK. So why are some wind generators being paid to turn off when it's too windy? Here's what you need to know. Last year, nearly a quarter of the UK's total electricity production came from wind power. And depending on the day, it can actually be quite a lot more than that. When it's very windy, actually wind can provide more than half of the UK's electricity. When it's very windy, sometimes we have a problem because we generate a lot of the electricity in the north of the country, in Scotland and in the North Sea, obviously because it's very windy, but a lot of the demand for electricity remains in the south of the country, around London in particular. So we have to move that electricity from the north to the south. And our issue is that when it's extremely windy, actually wind farms produce too much electricity for the cables that we have. Right now, there's a real bottleneck between the Scottish transmission system and the English transmission system. And because we don't have the capacity to store excess renewable energy when we make it, not yet anyway, the National Grid electricity system operator has no choice but to ask the wind farms to turn off. And then those wind farms get paid for doing so. In addition, the National Grid then has to turn on gas power stations closer to the source of demand near London, for example. This is happening more and more as we add more and more wind power onto the system, and our capacity to generate electricity using wind continues to outstrip the capacity of our transmission system. So last year it cost about £200 million to turn off wind power, and by one calculation around £700 million to turn on gas power closer to the source of demand. And the National Grid has estimated that the problem will probably get worse. These constraint costs are going to increase towards the middle of this decade, possibly up to as high as £2.5 billion a year. And the cost of all of this is ultimately borne by bill payers. The National Grid makes the first payment but then passes on those costs, and we all pay for them under the network costs section of our electricity bills. Now, constraint costs aren't just limited to wind. The National Grid pays to balance the system. It pays fossil fuel generators to ramp down production as well. But there's a big focus on the issues around transmitting renewable energy because it's such an important part of our future, such an important part of the government's promise to completely decarbonise power generation by 2035. So what are the solutions? Well, because everyone knows it's a problem, Ofgem, the government, the National Grid, they are very focused on solving it. There are plans underway already to build an expensive new undersea cable between Scotland and England. That's going to cost over £3 billion and take about 5 years to complete. And there's lots of investment going into storage technologies like green hydrogen and batteries and pumped hydro. But the bottom line is the transmission capacity issue in the UK has to be solved if we are to get to net zero by 2050 and to decarbonise our power systems by 2035.